Hello.
Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're back with another Star Wars story doing What If Anakin Was Sent to Utapau in Revenge of the Sith. Before we begin, special thanks to all of our patrons. Go down below, check out the podcast, the Twitch, and our merch that is limited time available until the end of the Earth series. Part 6 is coming out this weekend, and a new miniseries is along the way of production. Otherwise, our story begins inside of the Jedi Council chambers. Anakin Skywalker had been informed of the location of the droid general the night before. Chancellor Palpatine had the intel before anyone else did, and while to Anakin that wasn't weird, he would report it to the Jedi Council in the morning. When the Council gathered, he informed them that an intercepted message from Utapau revealed that General Grievous and the rest of the Separatists were present on the Outer Rim world. Anakin admitted that the Chancellor suggested that he lead the campaign in the Outer Rim and fight against General Grievous. Mace Windu wasn't overly fond of that, as he turned to Skywalker and told him that the Council would make their own decision on who would go to Utapau. Master Yoda looked over at Windu from across the galaxy. Yoda was currently on Kashyyyk, and he was about to suggest that a Jedi Master lead the invasion, but he heard a voice of Qui-Gon Jinn tell him to let Anakin go. Yoda stopped. He choked on his words. He'd had interactions with the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn a couple of times in the last couple of months, but this was a very firm voice from Qui-Gon, and so Yoda spoke up, telling the Council that while they didn't want Palpatine making decisions for the Jedi Council, it would be best for Anakin Skywalker to go to the Outer Rim and challenge General Grievous. The 501st was one of the most elite legions in the Grand Army of the Republic, and they would be perfectly built for an assault in the Outer Rim. Not to mention, Anakin had been on Utapau with Master Kenobi in the last couple of months. The Council was shocked, as Ki-Adi-Mundi suggests that a Master go with Anakin in that case. Windu silenced Mundi by suggesting that if Yoda believed Skywalker was capable, then he should be able to go to Utapau and complete the war for them against General Grievous. Anakin, after all, was the chosen one. In a way, this came off as a patronizing and even passive-aggressive statement, and while yes, in a way it really was, Windu truly had faith in Skywalker. He just didn't trust Anakin, and so he decided that having Anakin away from Palpatine in the final stretch of the war would actually make it easier for him to deal with the investigation. With Anakin present on Coruscant, it would become more of a problem for the investigation because of how close the two of them were. Anakin was genuinely surprised and shocked. The only reason Palpatine suggested this to Anakin was to get his hopes up for them to be crushed by the Council. This was a way of Palpatine to create a divide between the Jedi and his future pupil. He knew the Jedi would restrict Anakin and continue to force him to spy on him, but when that didn't happen, Palpatine was shocked, though Palpatine wouldn't find out about any of this until much later down the line. Anakin looked across the Council and they all looked at him, waiting for him to get up and get ready for his invasion of Utapau. Obi-Wan looked over, thinking about suggesting himself as an aide, but he kept himself quiet as Anakin walked out of the Council chambers. Obi-Wan was worried about Anakin. He never fought Grievous before, but now he was no longer spying on the Chancellor, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal, because Anakin no longer had to spy on someone he looked at as a friend. Anakin would have to mount up the rest of his forces, because half of them were on Mandalore. The rest of the 501st was still elite though, even without Jesse and Rex. Anakin would make it work with Commander Oppo, especially since Oppo was a straight shooter, and he never displayed any issues with following orders. That wasn't to suggest that Rex ever did, but rather to suggest that Oppo was a solid backup in the case of needing a backup. Regardless, Anakin was quick. He was ready to end this war and be back in time for Padme's pregnancy, which meant one thing. The 501st had to load up into their fleet, and Anakin and Appa would meet up with Yularen on the Resolute. Everything would be formatted for absolute victory. Anakin made it very clear they were going to dive into combat. No recon, just battle. They didn't know what to expect from Utapau, but they weren't aligned with the Separatists. It would be better to catch General Grievous off guard on Utapau, rather than give him or the Separatist Council any time to escape. Anakin was going to go full 501st with this. Obi-Wan never got a chance to say anything to Skywalker before he left, but he left him a message on his transmitter. Instead of staying put, Obi-Wan was being sent to Mandalore to relieve the 501st so that they could join up with Skywalker on Utapau. Obi-Wan's mission was to assist in the capture or death of Darth Maul. Obi-Wan understood his mission, and so he and the 212th loaded up and departed for Mandalore. While Mace had believed in Ahsoka and Captain Rex, he had a real reason for wanting Obi-Wan and Anakin off of Coruscant. Most of the council was already off of Coruscant, aside from a few members who were brought back to stay within the temple, such as Masters Rancis, Saesee Tin, Agan Kolar, and Shaak Ti, who were among those members. The closest Jedi Master to the temple from within the council, of course, was Master Plo Koon, who was on Cato Nemodia, another core world within, well, the core. Windu wasn't planning anything treacherous, he just wanted Kenobi and Skywalker out of the way in case there was an issue with Palpatine. Not that Obi-Wan wouldn't have done his duty, it was more so the possibility of Obi-Wan trying to see both sides of everything, and being as close as he was to Anakin, that could become a liability if Palpatine was indeed the Sith Lord. Though Windu didn't really know if any of that would matter. The end of the Clone Wars was in sight, and within a couple of hours of Kenobi departing, the 501st would arrive outside of Utapau, and the invasion would commence. General Grievous would be rounding up his forces when the 501st came down from the skies like bats out of hell. LAATs filled the skies and the ground invasion began. Skywalker jumped out of his gunship as Appo and a group of clones followed him. Anakin looked forward, blocking blasters and scanning the battlefield, looking for General Grievous. Anakin directed Appo to spread the forces out, just enough to get the heavy tanks on the ground for the battle to fully commence. Appo took in the order and started directing the troops in their specific directions. Anakin was a frontline general and he took to the front lines immediately, destroying crab droids and moving in with his men at high speed. Skywalker told the clones before coming here that they were to inform him if they saw General Grievous and to capture the Separatist Council at all costs. The battle immediately got tense and the clones pushed their hardest. They all knew what was on the line, what they were about to do. Did they have any rebellious thoughts, any second guesses about what would happen? No, not a single one of them. The war was almost over, and the war was within their hands. If the 501st did their job, then the war would be won here, and now, on Utapau. The troopers made their push as jetpack troopers dropped in from the upper levels after completing a small skirmish up there. It was at this moment, after ripping apart a spider droid, did Skywalker finally come face to face with General Grievous. Both of the most victorious generals on their respective sides of combat, and they were finally meeting here, for the first time on a battlefield, in the final battle of the Clone War. Anakin walked across the path slowly. He looked at Grievous and spoke across the field of combat, telling General Grievous that he would pay for the Jedi that were killed by him. Grievous snarled as he stepped forward, denting the floor beneath him. Grievous called Skywalker a foolish Jedi, the same Jedi who believed they could defeat him, only to find themselves as victims to him in combat. Grievous ignited his lightsabers and threw himself forward. Anakin ducked and moved to the side, throwing a counter-strike. Grievous moved back around and met Skywalker in between the strike. The two of them began throwing their blades back and forth at each other. Skywalker was surprised by the power that Grievous actually had, but he had one advantage that Grievous did not have. Anakin had spoke with Master Kit Fisto about Grievous at one point during the Clone War, and he understood the concept of how to beat General Grievous, and he had the opportunity to do so now. Obi-Wan used it a lot in combat with Grievous, though it was Obi-Wan's overarching skill in Form 3 that allowed him to be dominant in fights against General Grievous. Kit Fisto, regardless, revealed that the secret was Form 1 of lightsaber combat. Anakin was genuinely taken aback by this when he was told this, but it was true. Form 1 had a lot of random, unpredictable strikes that the other 6 lightsaber forms did not have, and so it caused a weakness for General Grievous. The reason being that Grievous's cybernetics couldn't calculate the movement of Form 1 lightsaber combat because they weren't traditional. So, Anakin familiarized himself with Form 1 throughout the Clone War. He never had the chance to use it, but now he did, though Anakin was currently using his traditional form, trying to play the offensive game with the deadliest Jedi hunter the galaxy had ever seen. Anakin pushed hard, and was met with stiff resistance. He only began to realize in this moment why Grievous was so good at what he did. Every strike he made was precise, and for the first time since his first duel with Dooku, he was on defense. Anakin moved backwards, flawlessly blocking and dropping and dodging every strike made by Grievous. The battle was tense and Anakin stumbled back as he and Grievous taunted each other by stepping around in circles. Grievous opened up 2 more arms and ignited 2 more lightsabers. Anakin looked at Grievous and then stepped back ever so slightly. The memory of what Kit Fisto said to him sat in the forefront of his mind at this moment. Anakin grinned. That was all he had to do to win this. He stepped forward and moved into his stance of Form 1. Grievous locked on to this and his lightsabers began spinning around in circles as he marched forward towards Skywalker. Anakin saw this as he faked forward as Grievous brought all 4 of his lightsabers to the middle, only to clash with each other. Skywalker moved past, slashing down onto Grievous's lightsabers, pushing him off balance. Skywalker then faced Grievous and threw the Force at him, throwing him dozens of feet back, slamming into a wall behind. Grievous wailed like a serpent as he got to his hands and feet and cockroached his way over to his little vehicle. Skywalker saw this and he said to Grievous that he wasn't getting away this time. Anakin used the Force to rip the wheels apart off of each other and crushing the engine compartment inside of the vehicle. Grievous looked down and whined as the vehicle exploded, sending him flying off of it. Anakin edge-walked his way over to Grievous as he spun his lightsaber in his hand, only for Grievous to get a hold of another lightsaber and begin the duel right back where it left off. Skywalker danced back, then using his strength to really take advantage of Grievous. He threw Grievous off his balance, cutting through the 2 of Grievous's arms, leaving him almost entirely defenseless. Skywalker saw his advantage as he sheathed his lightsaber and used the Force to lift Grievous off the ground before slamming him down with the Force 1, 2, 3, 4, more and more times until Grievous was a shell enough to form robotic. Anakin wasn't done yet, as he stepped forward and put his boot on Grievous's mask. Anakin said that this was for all the Jedi, all the clones, and every single soul that he took from the galaxy. Before Grievous could utter a word, Anakin plunged his lightsaber into Grievous's face, killing him instantly. Anakin turned around and saw a group of clones coming his way. Anakin told them that they needed to get in contact with the Jedi Council and inform them of the defeat of General Grievous. The war was almost over. All they had to do was win. The troops took the order, as one of them informed Anakin that the Separatist Council had been captured as well. Anakin grinned as he turned around and spun his lightsaber in his hands, saying that they still had a battle to win, even though the war was almost over. On Mandalore, Obi-Wan met up with Ahsoka inside of the throne room. Mandalore had turned to night, and the battle had yet begun. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were there to retrieve a clone trooper by the name of Jesse, who had been interrogated by Maul. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka walked into the throne room. Instead of attempting to wager with Ahsoka, Maul moved right into combat. Ahsoka was a terrific duelist, even though she was a bit rusty after having not fought for several months with a lightsaber. But because of Kenobi's presence, Maul wasn't in a mood to try and bargain. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan moved at incredible speeds as they pushed Maul back. While Maul was very talented, he was arguably too flashy for his own good, and all that flash cost him in moments it mattered most. For Maul, the last time he fought Kenobi with someone else on his side, he ended up at the bottom of a pit. Maul wasn't going to allow that to happen yet again. He was going to kill both Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. Maul tried pushing Kenobi, reminding him of Satine's death just on the floor where they were standing, but Obi-Wan didn't break. He had the strength to resist the dark side. Plus, with the wit of Ahsoka at play, Maul was fuming, because every word that came from his mouth was matched with an exaggerated response to make him look foolish. It worked. It pissed off Maul a lot. Ahsoka had Kenobi's arrogance, not to mention that Kenobi was right next to her. The three dueled consistently in the Great Hall, only for Ahsoka and Obi-Wan to pull together as they cut down the Sith Lord in combat. It wasn't easy. As a joint effort, it worked up to the strength to do it. But when they did it, it was almost somber for Obi-Wan. He finally eased the peace of Qui-Gon and Satine after having claimed the life of the one who killed them both. Of course, Obi-Wan had no knowledge of Yoda having the ability to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn, but it still felt like redemption for Obi-Wan to finally take down Maul. Though Obi-Wan had a heart-to-heart with Ahsoka, she connected the dots to what Maul said about Satine, and she had a lot of questions as to why this was a big deal, especially because she was no longer a Jedi, and she could ask these questions. It would be a conversation that would come after the clones of the 212th got rid of the Mandalorians. Gar Saxon didn't have the support he needed, and he was caught off guard by the clone army that began to wipe the floor with them. This wasn't even the original force that was here, it was an entirely new army. while at the same time the rest of the 501st would arrive over Utapau. The only missing member of the 501st was Jesse, because he was captured on Mandalore and released on Mandalore. Though the Battle of Utapau was overwhelmingly decided, Yularen cleaned up the rest of the defense fleet, and the remaining clones from Mandalore made their presence very well known. On the other side of the galaxy, Mace Windu informed the council members that they were going to go to the Chancellor's office to relieve him of duty. Being that Grievous was no longer a threat, it was time that there was a change inside the Republic itself, and that change had to come from a new Chancellor. The reason for that was because the Jedi believed that Palpatine was too corrupt, and his presence was overbearing on the Republic. So, as the night cascaded down on Coruscant, the Jedi left their ivory tower to confront the man they had hunches about being a Sith Lord. The truth is, this action wasn't over Palpatine being a Sith Lord. This was actually over him being a corrupt politician. The issue for Palpatine is that he didn't expect this. He didn't actually completely know that Anakin was off-world. Through the Force, it felt as if he were somewhere else, but he had no physical or verbal evidence to confirm what he suspected. Most of this was because Palpatine couldn't believe that the Jedi would ever send him to Utapau on his own to lead a mission against General Grievous. The only real reason Anakin felt further away was because of his visions that Palpatine was putting into his mind, but he could do that from any distance without feeling any different, hence why Palpatine wasn't too suspicious about the entire situation. When the Jedi arrived, it was painfully evident to Palpatine that he had been fooled by the awareness of the Jedi. He had been deceived because everything was going perfectly, and the one time he relied on the Jedi to make his job that much easier, they failed him by throwing the Chosen One as far away from him as possible. That was the issue. Palpatine had several instances of the Jedi digging their own grave for him. One such occurrence was when Obi-Wan faked his death, or for example another time when they got rid of Ahsoka. But this was different. Palpatine needed the Jedi to keep Anakin here on Coruscant so that he could manipulate him. Palpatine didn't notice this until the Jedi just walked into his office, 4 Jedi Masters, and they looked ready to end everything for him. Sidious knew he had no time to wait for anyone, and this was a competition that he had to win. He had no issue fighting the Jedi. The only issue would be explaining everything to the Senate after he beat them. The 4 Jedi stopped before they ignited their lightsabers. They accused Palpatine of treason. He told them that they had nothing to prove against him, before Mace came straight out, suggesting that he was behind the invasion of Naboo all the way to the beginning of the Clone War. Palpatine growled as he stood up. Sidious had no time to play and debate with the Jedi. He needed to kill them before they kept talking up a storm for the security recordings inside of his chambers to report to the Senate. 2 lightsabers ripped out from the corners of the room as Sidious grinned. The Jedi all ignited their lightsabers, but it was far too late. Sidious was already across the room and he'd already cut down Anakin Skywalker. Sae-Seaton wasn't too far behind, as Kit Fisto and Mace Windu worked as a tandem to hold their own against the mighty Sith Lord. Kit Fisto was able to stay strong, especially with Windu using Vapad and Shatterpoint against Sidious. The 3 duelists fought their hardest. Without Anakin distracting Kit Fisto, the Jedi Master was able to beat back every advancement made by the Dark Lord of the Sith. On another note, Sidious was able to keep both Jedi off of him with the use of his 2 lightsabers. His technique was flawless and his skill was nearly unmatched. Palpatine had no issue with skill with a lightsaber, because it was all remarkable. But Mace Windu was also extremely talented as he pushed Sidious off of his balance. Windu was able to keep Fisto in the fight, mostly by keeping Sidious on defense. It was Windu who was able to draw on the dark side from Palpatine and use it against him, something Sidious didn't really know was at all possible. Palpatine was doing exceedingly well under such conditions, until Kit Fisto cut through one of Sidious's lightsabers. Victory looked on beyond the horizon for the Jedi, as a group of clone troopers rushed in after hearing the commotion from down the corridor. Fisto immediately bounced away from Palpatine, as Windu and the Sith Lord interlocked in intense combat. Fisto, on the other hand, went to stop the clones from interfering, trying to get them to understand that the Chancellor was a bad man. Commander Fox wasn't having any of this, as he raised his blasters to fire at Fisto if he didn't comply. The Jedi Master looked at the clones. Some of them were unsteady, as others were fully ready to risk their lives for what they believed was right. Those that weren't ready to assist Fox stepped back. Fisto raised his weapon and demanded that Fox stand down immediately. This was larger than the war. This was the fate of the entire galaxy in the hands of the people in this room. In the background, Sidious tried to make a plea with the clones, but Windu kept pushing him back more and more, keeping him flabbergasted. Sidious couldn't believe the fact that Mace Windu was actually pushing him back. The clones stepped forward as Fisto used the Force to push them from the room, closing the blast door to keep them out. Fisto turned around just in time to block a strike from Palpatine, as Windu followed the Sith Lord. Fisto pushed off Sidious' strike and spun around to cut through Sidious just as Windu got there. The combined strength of Windu and Fisto allowed them to come out victorious of this battle, though when they opened the blast doors, Fox was fuming, accusing the Jedi of treason. Because Windu outranked Fox, he told the clone commander that he would stand down until the accusation against Palpatine was presented to the Senate. Windu was still holding a lightsaber, and he was looking down at Fox, standing over him. Windu had a typically assertive presence, but this was fierce. The other clones backed down as Fox put his blasters away and gave out a snarly yes sir before turning around and leaving. The Jedi had to put the case away. If the Republic believed that Palpatine was in the right, then the Jedi would be accused of treason, and that was something the Jedi couldn't simply allow to happen. And so the Jedi went forward and into the security recordings of the build-up before the battle. The next week and a half would see a critical change in the galaxy. The Siege of Mandalore and of Utapau was a great success. Upon return to Coruscant, Skywalker would find out about Palpatine and step down from his seat on the High Council and remove himself from the Jedi Order. He had the chance to become a father, and he wouldn't pass up on the opportunity to do so with the love of his life. On another note, Ahsoka would stay out of the Jedi Order, and for the Jedi themselves, they would actually be at first convicted, before another voice, one sorely missed during the hearings, would acquit them of the death of Palpatine. That voice being Padme's, because what the Jedi did was an act of public service for the galaxy. While yes, the Clone Wars were terrible, the end of the war came. There was peace finally in the galaxy, and that's all everyone needed. They needed the peace that came after the war ended. The Jedi would return to the role of peacekeepers, and the clones would have a chance to integrate into society as the galaxy rebuilt from the ashes of war. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy, Apollo Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Flynn Van Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit 2,000 likes on this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see a what if, let me know below. I read all your comments, but I don't do crossovers. Check out the Twitch, me Discord, and Patreon, podcast, and yeah, if you want to support me in other ways, merch down below. I'm not running a giveaway, so if you see some dumb motherfucker trying to convince you that I'm giving away stuff, please report them. I report them every time I see them, but as I've mentioned before, YouTube doesn't protect us all the time, and also I'm not running a giveaway, so I don't know how stupid they possibly could be, but they are definitely stupid of some sort. Otherwise, let's talk about our story. I know this story was rather short, and honestly, I didn't know what to do with the story, and I'm not saying that I kind of went into the story without trying, because I certainly didn't know. I had this thumbnail sitting around and not really doing anything, because this thumbnail was something that I didn't think I would ever use. And so when I came to the story, I was like, well, it's kind of like, it's going to be a short story. I knew it was going to be a short story, and I want to keep stories as interesting as possible, and that's always something that I want to do. And I think this story is more so a fun story. It's predictable, which is kind of nice, because, you know, I'm kind of doing like a mini-series, like the 6-part mini-series that I was talking about that's coming out after the Earth series is going to be epic, and that's a much more complex writing than this, and this story was more so for fun. This one wasn't my typical, I'm going to throw a twist and curve every way I can to just throw you off and see what happens. I think this was more so a fun story, you know, a bunch of fighting, a bunch of combat, you know. It's kind of like a heroes versus villains on Battlefront. It's kind of like, let's throw everything in and see what happens. And again, that doesn't mean I wasn't trying on this, because I certainly did try on this. But this video just, it's kind of straight to the point, even from the title. And based on the title, you can't really change all too much about it to make it all that interesting, if that makes sense. And so I had a lot of fun with this, and like some of the things that I had a lot of fun with was, like, for example, making Anakin use Form 1, because I think Anakin would genuinely struggle against Grievous. I'm not saying he would lose, but I think he would genuinely struggle against Grievous. Again, Grievous's cybernetics are meant to take a hold of what a Jedi does and use it against them. You know, he can do a readout of every lightsaber combat form, and he take advantage of that. And Form 1 is how you avoid that. And so I think Anakin resolves to using Form 1, and he uses Form 1, and that works for him in this episode. As for Mace beating Sidious, that's confirmed by George Lucas, and so I am going by what the maker says. And that's what happens here in a way, but actually I kind of had fun with having like Kit Fisto survive and beating Sidious, because Kit Fisto, for those of you that don't know, in the, I think it's a novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Kit Fisto survived the battle until he felt Anakin's presence. And so without Anakin just kind of showing up on a whim, I don't think Fisto would ever really be like, oh wait, hold on, who the hell is that? And then they get like struck down by a lightsaber. So anyways, yeah. But I hope you enjoy the story. Again, much simpler than the complexity of stories that I'm pumping out. Like I said, Earth Part 6 is coming, and that story is going to be a big finale, and the whole mini-series that I've hinted at for the last couple videos is going to be coming out soon as well. So I'm really trying to make an effort to make those stories, well, I'm trying to make an effort of every story being good, but I'm also trying to make them very coherent, long-term stories so that you can follow them along episode to episode, like you're watching a TV show. So anyways, I hope you all enjoy this fun, combative video that wasn't like too taxing on your minds. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.